Man, it's over for my man. That guy.
For more than a decade, Drake didn't just dominate music, he defined it. Every year had a Drake song attached to it, sometimes more than one. His voice became background noise to everyday life, cars, clubs, radios, playlists, social media clips. And because of that, something dangerous happened. People stopped asking why Drake was winning, they just accepted that he always would. From the outside, it looked effortless. Albums debuted at #1, records kept breaking. New artists mentioned his name like it was a blessing. Even when critics complained, it didn't matter. The numbers shut everyone up. But here's the thing about dominance, it can hide change for a very long time, because when you're winning, nobody questions the system, not the artist, not the fans, not the industry. And that's exactly how this story begins. Not with a failure, not with a scandal, not with a moment that made headlines. It began with a shift in feeling, one so small that most people didn't notice it at all. The music was still successful, the image was still polished, the machine kept moving, but slowly, the excitement around Drake started to feel different. And once that shift started, it didn't reverse. This isn't a story about Drake suddenly falling off. It's about how someone can stay on top and still lose control of the moment. So when did it really begin? What was the first sign that something was changing behind the scenes? And how did the most consistent artist of his generation end up in a position he had never truly faced before? That's where the real story starts. For a long time, Drake wasn't just successful, he was inevitable. No matter what was happening in music, Drake always had a presence. If it wasn't his own album dominating the charts, it was his feature carrying someone else's song. If it wasn't a radio hit, it was a streaming record. And if it wasn't a release, it was his name trending without him even trying. That level of consistency did something rare. It removed doubt. Drake became the safest bet in the industry. Labels trusted him, platforms trusted him, artists trusted him. When Drake attached his name to something, it felt pre-approved by the culture itself. Even people who didn't consider themselves fans still listened because Drake had become part of the default soundtrack. What made this era so powerful wasn't just numbers, it was control. Drake understood timing better than almost anyone. He knew when to drop, he knew when to disappear. He knew how to balance vulnerability with confidence, softness with dominance. His music felt personal, but never weak, emotional, but never fragile. That balance allowed him to reach multiple audiences at once without alienating any of them. And because everything worked, nothing was questioned. If a song sounded familiar, it was called signature. If a project felt safe, it was called consistent. If critics complained, fans pointed at the charts and moved on. This created a dangerous comfort zone. Drake didn't need to evolve because the system rewarded him exactly as he was. And the longer that went on, the more the industry built itself around that version of Drake. Playlists were designed with his sound in mind, release calendars avoided his drops, entire careers were shaped by proximity to him. But dominance like that comes with a hidden cost. When you stay on top for too long, change doesn't announce itself loudly, it slips in quietly. And because everything still looks successful on paper, it's easy to mistake momentum for stability. During this era, Drake wasn't just winning, he was insulated, protected by success, shielded by numbers, surrounded by validation. And that insulation made it impossible to notice the earliest warning signs, because the first real problem wasn't external pressure, it wasn't competition, it wasn't even criticism. It was the fact that Drake had no reason to feel uncomfortable anymore. And in creative careers, comfort is often the most dangerous place to be.
You guys want to go for a ride? We can go for a ride. This is my baby, I guess.
The first cracks didn't show up as losses, they showed up as patterns. At first it was subtle. Drake was still releasing music at a high level, still dominating playlists, still pulling massive streaming numbers. But longtime listeners began noticing something they couldn't quite explain. The songs weren't bad, they were familiar, too familiar. The same emotional angles, the same themes of success, distance, reflection. The same late-night mood wrapped in luxury and loneliness. What once felt like evolution started to feel like repetition. In any other artist's career, this might have gone unnoticed, but Drake had trained his audience to expect growth disguised as consistency. When that growth slowed, the difference became impossible to ignore, even if no one wanted to say it out loud. Critics began framing their complaints more carefully, not "this is bad," but "this feels safe," not "this doesn't work," but "this doesn't move anything forward." And Drake didn't respond directly. Instead, he doubled down on output. More songs, more features, more visibility. The logic was simple. If momentum stayed high, the conversation would move on. And for a while, it did. But something important was happening beneath the surface. The discussion around Drake shifted from excitement to expectation. Fans stopped waiting to be surprised. They pressed play already knowing what they were going to get. And when that happens, attention changes. Listening becomes passive instead of engaged. That's a dangerous transition for any artist, especially one built on emotional connection, because Drake's power was never just about hits. It was about relatability at scale. He made millions of people feel like he was speaking directly to them. As repetition crept in, that connection weakened just enough to be noticeable. And once that bond loosens, even slightly, everything else starts to feel heavier. Lyrics are analyzed more harshly, choices are questioned more often, silence becomes suspicious, familiarity becomes fatigue. This wasn't a fall, it wasn't even a stumble, it was the moment Drake stopped feeling new and started feeling predictable. And that shift set the stage for something much bigger, because when predictability enters the conversation, control becomes a priority. And Drake was about to lean into control harder than ever before. As predictability crept into the conversation, Drake's approach began to change, not in sound at first, but in behavior. This was the phase where control quietly became the priority. Instead of letting the music exist on its own, Drake started responding to the atmosphere around him. Not always directly, but consistently. Lyrics began addressing criticism before it fully formed. Bars felt less like expression and more like clarification. Even moments that should have felt confident carried an undertone of defense. That shift matters more than it seems. Artists at Drake's level rarely feel the need to explain themselves. Their silence is usually the statement. But during this period, Drake's silence didn't feel natural. It felt intentional, calculated. Every move appeared to be weighed against how it would be received rather than what it represented creatively. This is where control starts changing energy. Instead of creating moments, Drake began managing reactions. Instead of leading the conversation, he started anticipating it. And when an artist does that, the audience feels it, even if they can't articulate why. Fans started listening differently. Lyrics weren't just heard, they were interpreted. Subtle lines were treated like responses. Releases felt like strategic moves instead of emotional ones. And the more Drake tried to guide the narrative, the more attention shifted away from the music itself. Every song became part of a larger explanation. Every album felt like a defensive position rather than a statement of direction. Control also changed how Drake presented himself publicly. Interviews felt safer, statements felt rehearsed, confidence remained, but spontaneity faded. This didn't make Drake weaker, it made him heavier. Every action carried intention, but also pressure. And pressure is dangerous for someone whose dominance was built on effortlessness, because the illusion of effortlessness is what made Drake untouchable in the first place. Once that illusion cracks, the audience begins to look for proof of insecurity, and they usually find it. This is the phase where Drake stopped feeling like someone who couldn't be touched and started feeling like someone who didn't want to be touched. That distinction changes everything, and it set the stage for the moment Drake couldn't control at all, the moment where the narrative moved faster than he could respond. That moment was coming, and when it arrived, it didn't just test Drake's dominance, it exposed the limits of his control. The moment Drake couldn't control didn't build slowly, it arrived all at once. When the tension with Kendrick Lamar escalated, it wasn't just another competitive exchange. This time, the stakes felt different. For years, Drake had navigated rivalry by staying calculated, responding on his own timeline, choosing his moments, and never allowing himself to look rushed. That pattern broke here. Instead of dictating the pace, Drake found himself reacting to it, and that shift was immediately noticeable. The confidence that once felt effortless now felt strained. The pauses between responses felt heavier. Every move invited more scrutiny than support. What made this moment irreversible wasn't public opinion, it was exposure. For the first time, Drake's decision-making was happening in real time, under a microscope. Fans weren't just listening to music, they were tracking reactions, timing, and silence. The conversation wasn't about creativity anymore, it was about strategy. And strategy doesn't inspire loyalty the way authenticity does. The illusion that Drake always knew the next step disappeared. Instead of seeing a master at work, people saw hesitation. Instead of dominance, they saw calculation under pressure. And once that image cracked, it couldn't be repaired with numbers or chart positions. This was the point where Drake lost something more important than momentum. He lost narrative control. From that moment on, even strong releases felt reactive. Even confident bars were read defensively. Drake was still talented, still massive, still successful, but no longer unquestioned. The shift didn't mean Kendrick won in a simple sense. It meant Drake couldn't reset the conversation. And when an artist built on control can't regain control, the impact lasts far beyond one moment. because once the audience realizes you can be pushed off balance, they start watching for it. That's when dominance becomes fragile, and that fragility began to change how the industry itself responded. After that turning point, nothing collapsed overnight. Instead, everything slowed. On paper, Drake was still winning. Albums debuted high, singles performed well, his name stayed visible. But behind the scenes, the tone around him shifted in a way that numbers couldn't capture. This is how cooling happens in the music industry. There are no press releases announcing it, no public statements, no dramatic exits. It shows up in subtler ways. Collaborations begin to feel less intentional. Features feel safer instead of exciting. The urgency to align with you fades. Drake was still respected, but the sense of inevitability was gone. Working with him no longer felt like stepping into the future of the culture. It felt like stepping into something already established, comfortable, predictable, protected. That distinction matters. At the highest level, artists don't just chase success, they chase momentum. And momentum depends on belief. The belief that being close to you elevates everyone involved. When that belief weakens, the industry adjusts quietly. People still show up, they still smile, they still collaborate. But fewer risks are taken, fewer careers are built around your orbit, fewer moments feel urgent. Drake still had access, but influence is different from access. Influence shapes direction. Access just maintains presence. And during this phase, Drake's role began to shift from leader to fixture, a constant but no longer the engine. This change also affected how his releases were treated. Instead of defining the sound of the moment, they were evaluated within it. Instead of setting the tone, they responded to it. And that's a subtle but critical downgrade in cultural power. What made this period especially difficult was that Drake could still point to success. The numbers were there, the reach was undeniable. On the surface, nothing looked wrong, but the industry doesn't move on what's visible, it moves on what feels inevitable. And for the first time in his career, Drake no longer felt inevitable. That realization didn't hit executives or critics first, it reached the audience. Because fans sense industry shifts before they're ever explained, and that led to the final transformation, one that couldn't be solved with strategy, output, or control. The most important change didn't happen in boardrooms or studios, it happened quietly among the fans. At first glance, nothing looked wrong. Drake's songs were still streaming in massive numbers, his releases still landed on playlists, his name still carried weight. But something crucial was missing, the defense. In the past, Drake's fans didn't just listen, they protected him. Any criticism was challenged, any rival was dismissed, any doubt was met with loyalty. That kind of devotion is what turns popularity into cultural power. Over time, that devotion softened. New songs were consumed but not championed. Criticism appeared, and fewer people rushed to shut it down. Conversations moved on faster than they used to. This wasn't rejection, it was detachment. And detachment is far more dangerous than hate, because hate still means people care. Drake's presence began to feel passive, something people accepted rather than reacted to. His releases became background events instead of moments. Fans still checked in, but they didn't feel compelled to stay. This shift also changed how Drake was discussed. Instead of excitement, there was comparison. Instead of anticipation, there was analysis. Instead of emotional connection, there was distance. That distance altered the emotional contract Drake had built with his audience. For years, his music thrived on intimacy, late-night confessionals wrapped in confidence. But as that intimacy faded, the music felt less personal, even when it was deeply autobiographical. Fans didn't turn on Drake, they simply stopped needing him the way they once did. And when that happens, even the biggest artists feel smaller. Drake was still successful, still respected, still present, but no longer central to the conversation. That left one unavoidable question hanging in the air, not just for fans, but for Drake himself. What happens when dominance ends quietly? Drake didn't disappear, he didn't fail publicly, and he didn't lose everything in one dramatic moment. Instead, something far more complicated happened. The version of Drake that once felt untouchable slowly became familiar. Not in a comforting way, but in a way that removed urgency. The culture didn't reject him, it adjusted around him, and that adjustment matters. Because success in music isn't just about numbers or visibility, it's about belief. The belief that an artist represents now, that they're shaping the present instead of maintaining the past. Drake still has the tools, the talent, the platform, the audience, but what he no longer has guaranteed is momentum. And momentum is the hardest thing to rebuild once it fades. The real question isn't whether Drake can make another hit, It's whether he can make people care in the same way again. Can he surprise an audience that thinks it already knows him? Can he create moments instead of managing perception? Can he release music that feels necessary instead of expected? Maybe this is just a long middle chapter, not an ending, or maybe it's the quiet close of an era that defined a generation. Either way, one thing is clear: Drake is no longer untouchable, and what he chooses to do next will decide whether this story continues or finally settles into history.